Hey folks out there in YouTube land, subscribers, if you haven't subscribed already, please go click the like and subscribe button, and please share this video. There's a lot of controversy on some of the libertarian pages about the libertarian platform. Unfortunately, a lot of people are insisting that I haven't read it as usual. Oh, you didn't read the platform. Go read the platform, and then here's this book, and here's that book, and here's this other book. It's not like I've never given any thought to the libertarian idea, and it's not like I've never given any thought to immigration. Immigration is the second most looked at issue by voters. It's the one that they have the highest concerns about, and there's consistent polling showing that anywhere between 11% and 29% of voters, that's their number one issue that they look at. So that what they need to hear is that you have a plan for securing the borders. Obviously, you've heard my opinion on Trump's wall. It's not cost effective, doesn't work. It's it's one layer of doesn't work type of policy. There are 65 international borders around the world. Half of them have been basically completely ineffective, including the most famous, the Great Wall of China. But I did want to show you there is a way. If you look at most of the government installations and private installations, most of the secure installations around the world, what we find is that you simply use 2 or 3 layers of cyclone fencing and some surveillance cameras, and of course they have a few border guards or security guards here and there. Even the most high security prisons use that. Certainly don't want to see any part of this country looking like a prison, but if you're going to secure the borders, that's the way to do it. So this is a map, and the reason I don't put this up as an element is I got to point to what I call the socialism belt. Now the socialism belt starts, get out of here, frickin' bug, nobody wants you. Uh-oh, flipping around. All right, so on the socialism belt, you start right over here around Ecuador and Central America, and this whole area tend to have socialist policies, socialist politicians, and gun control, and those policies kind of run across through Africa, through the tropics, but it's not a heat thing, something else. It goes through the Middle East, India, China, of course, and North Korea. Korea, of course, is actually fairly cold. So it's not really a heat issue. It's a question of people, and of course South Africa is one of the worst. Those countries tend to vote for socialist policies they're warned and warned and warned and warned by the people there. Socialism has a 100% failure rate, high crime, poverty, shortages of food, clothing, shelter, housing, you name it. When you have mass migrations, you have mass migrations from socialist countries to free market capitalist countries. So really quickly, you'll notice that these dark red countries that I've just pointed to in the socialism belt, those also have really high homicide rates. In fact, many of them, parts of Eastern Europe, Africa, and Latin America, have 10 times higher homicide rates. Honduras recently had a 20 times higher homicide rate. El Salvador still has a 16 times higher homicide rate than the United States. So these aren't small numbers. So I'm getting asked about open borders versus secure borders, and a lot of delegates are jumping on saying, well, if you support secure borders, you're not a libertarian. Get out of here. And that kind of get out of here attitude doesn't help build the party. The vast majority of libertarians don't agree with that. But let's see what the libertarian platform says. It's not like I don't have the whole thing memorized anyway, but I'll just read off of it. Section 3.4, Free Trade and Migration. We support the removal of government impediments to free trade. Obviously, we support 100% free trade. 93% of professional economists support free trade. Almost every educated person in society supports free trade. Although there's a constitutional argument, if you were going to have taxes, I think most people would agree that, as the Founding Fathers chose, if you're going to have taxes, it's better to have import tariffs than domestic taxation, because import tariffs tend to be indirect, and if you're a conscientious objector, you can avoid imported goods. And there seems to be less economic harm from taxes on international trade than taxes on domestic industry and small business and private investment. Political freedom and escape from tyranny demand that individuals not be unreasonably constrained by government in the crossing of political boundaries. So that's the big sentence in question. Political freedom and escape from tyranny demand that individuals not be unreasonably constrained by government in the crossing of political boundaries. So the majority of, even of people who say that they're for open borders, they almost always say, well, you got to stop them. Well, there's got to be vetting. Well, you've got to have a background check. Well, you've got to make sure they don't have ties to terrorists or terrorist groups or organized crime or Mexican drug cartels or who knows. Well, you got to make sure that they're, when they come into the country. There's a slight problem with that. It's not just when they come into the country. In order to have secure borders, you have to have border enforcement in the whole country. You have to have uniform enforcement of laws. So if you're a libertarian, then you don't support any violation of constitutional rights. You don't support any unlawful or unreasonable stops, seizures, or searches of any individual, unless you have, the courts have said, that their standard is without probable cause, which is more likely than not that that specific individual has committed a specific crime. And that's the courts. That's not even libertarians. That's what the courts have said. That you can't just blanket stop and search everyone and hold people and seize people. Even the courts, which are not great defenders of liberty, stopping a driver for up to 30 minutes and holding him while they bring the police dog around. And some of these police departments, they train the dog to just automatically claw at your door. And we found that this is a study that was done that shows that they have an 80% failure rate. 80% of the time you get a false positive. The dog is wrong. Police dog. But dogs don't just innately lie. They're trained to lie. But there's that sentence. Individuals not be unreasonably constrained by government in the crossing of political boundaries. Now that's funny. When people say that they're for open borders, but then they want the checks and they want to have a way of stopping people and they actually want to have a border and they want to do some kind of vetting process, that's not open borders. That's secure borders. The vast majority of people I run into keep saying open borders, this, that, and the other thing. They still want to stop people and just get their ID, run a check of some kind. So I hate to break it to them, but the truth is if you're going online attacking people for supporting secure borders and then you yourself want any kind of vetting process, then you're also for secure borders. You can't be for open borders and then also want to have your security measures of any kind. So that's important, but on the public poll, I'm going to ignore the polling data for a second. 98% of libertarians on isidewith.com said they want picked of all their choices, picked a secure borders answer. Only 2% supported open borders. Of the general public, only 1% support open borders. And there's another poll here that came up. It's a Harvard-Harris poll. It's fairly recent. They did scientific polling of 980 adults. 79% specifically said that they support secure borders. Only 8% even want to have 2.5 million new immigrants or more. That would include people who want both completely open and secure borders. So only a fraction of those would allow just unlimited, unbridled migration. So what would happen? See if I can find the numbers. I guess I can't. That's all right. So, oh, here they are. Homicide numbers. There are 437,000 homicides around the world each year, but they're not spread out evenly. Remember the map. In the Americas, and especially in Latin America, 157,000 homicides. That's almost 10 times as many as in the United States. And remember that twice the population of the United States in 642 million, so almost twice our population, but almost 10 times as many homicides, so 5 times higher homicide rate. Africa, 135,000 homicide rates, homicides per year. Throughout Asia, it's 122,000, but Eastern Europe has most of Europe's 22,000 homicides. So you're looking at, you know, the United States, which has the world average of about 3 or 4 homicides, or where are we, about 5? But Latin America, actually if you include the United States, 16 homicides per 100,000. Africa, 12 homicides per 100,000. So 2 to 5 times higher for those regions. Russia and Ukraine at one point had 10 times higher homicide rates than we do. El Salvador, 16 times higher homicide rate. So then there's a big question that Gallup asked. They asked not just Americans, they asked people around the world, would you move to another country if you could? 23% said yes. And those, excuse me, are disproportionately represented within that socialism belt. So, sorry, I've got to be closer to the mic. Disproportionate number in that socialism belt. Latin America, Africa, Eastern Europe, see if I can do a little bit better, and parts of Southeast Asia that have very, very high population densities, but they also have very, very large populations of people who've not been properly educated, didn't get trade school. Most of them don't speak any English, or they only speak, you know, just a handful of words, basic greetings. And so that's about 750 million people. Well, 750 million people, if they could move to the United States or could move to a Western country, they would. But almost all of those other Western countries have not only secure borders, but they have immigration limitations. So right there you're at potentially 750 million moving to the United States. That's the worst case scenario. Sorry, throat is dry. 750 million people, if they bring their family members with them, then you're looking at potentially anywhere between 1 and 2 billion people moving in to a country with a 300 million population. So potentially, for every 1 American and green card holder, you'd have as many as 5 additional people moving in. So think of that like your child's classroom. Instead of having 30 students for your one teacher, you would have 200 students. Imagine going onto a crowded freeway and you, instead of hitting just a little bit of traffic congestion, having gridlock that keeps you, that basically remains locked until midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning or later. We already have social services, schools, hospitals. We have all sorts of public services. They're already overwhelmed. So some people say, well, you know, yeah, it'll get really, really, really overcrowded, but it'll get so overcrowded that people will finally stop coming in. Well, they'll be coming in from places like Indonesia, China, India, and some of the most densely populated, low quality of life parts of the world, packing in. Do you think they're going to stop moving in? They're going to expect you to move out, and you might have to move out way out in the boonies, but under smart growth and environmental protection regulations, of course, you have a hard time finding a good-sized plot of land. So most Americans would be moving, I would expect, to either the boonies or they'd be moving to Canada, Europe, Australia, some other place to find space, because as a culture most Americans want to just have space. So worst case scenario, 2 billion. But a lot of the open borders advocates don't put a limit, and I've actually asked, how many people, what's the cap, what's the limit you would put on before you'd finally say, whoa, this is too many people, I'm not going to take any more. They don't give a straight answer. Well, the totalitarian left doesn't give a straight answer. Democrats and rhinos never give a straight answer. They just say, well, you're a racist. You're a racist because you want to stop illegal immigrants from Ireland and Ukraine. That means you hate immigrants. Well, that's BS, and if you have a brain in your head, you know that's garbage. So what do the American people think? Other polls have shown that by a margin of about 6 to 1 that there's 6 versus one guy over here. By a margin of 6 to 1, Americans are saying we have too much immigration. And there's more recent polling out there saying pretty much the same thing. And again, the people who want it said that they wanted immigration levels at, to stop were about 19% wanted no new immigration. 8% wanted higher numbers than what we have, or 2.5 million a year or higher. So essentially about 90% roughly said, the amount that we're getting right now or less, and only 8% said that they wanted more. 8%. So it's even more than 10 to 1. It's about 11 to 1 ratio. 11 to 1 in that poll said, time to cut it off a little bit. So now what are the political ramifications? Remember, here's soft libertarianism versus hard libertarianism. A hard libertarian basically tells the voters to go get stuffed. Well, that results in you getting like not even 1% of the vote. The Communist Party and the Nazis and neo-Nazis and all these, extreme fringe groups totally disregarded what the American people wanted. They didn't care. They had their own agenda. Even the Prohibition Party at least had, 10 or 15% of the public wanting to bring back prohibition, alcohol prohibition for some reason. And they hardly managed to get any votes. Barely can get on the ballot. You don't have enough activists and members, although plenty of prohibitionists in the Republican and Democrat parties. However, if you disregard the will of the public, then you fade out. In Congress, how many members of Congress are serving there, Democrats and rhinos, who support open borders, or voting for open borders, and managed to get in there without massive voter fraud, backroom dealing, scare tactics, buying votes, using the welfare bureaucracy to buy votes? Not too many. I can't think of a single one. You either support secure borders and you get elected, or you don't support secure borders and get elected. In fact, I've seen many congressional debates and presidential debates where they're trying to outdo each other to show who's even more for secure borders. When I've seen third parties, not just here, but almost everywhere in the world, they got anywhere, they supported secure borders and limitations on immigration. So finally, the response that I get is I see some open borders advocates in the Libertarian Party saying, I don't care about polls. I don't want to see any polls. I don't care if 99%. Well, you cannot care about 99%. And we'll continue to see our federal candidates average not 80% of the vote, not winning 80% of the vote in November, not 8.0% in November, but an average of 0.8%. That's the number that was reported to me. Remember, I got more than 5 times that on a budget of basically nothing. I spent virtually nothing on my governor's campaign except for I bought a bunch of yard signs. In fact, some of you guys may have noticed, if you look over the shoulder, that's one of the yard signs that I put up. Max Abramson, a vote for Max is for less taxes. Libertarian for governor. But there's one final point that I want to make. So if isidewith.com shows that only 2% of self-identified libertarians support open borders, and if most of the people who say that they support open borders want some kind of vetting, criminal background checks, they want some money being spent on what is a constitutional role under the law of nations. It's one of the authorities that national governments have, and the U.S. Constitution recognizes that. And if you're a constitutional libertarian, the vast majority of libertarians out there are constitutional libertarians. There are some who favor no government whatsoever, absolutely nothing whatsoever, and that's fine. I respect other people having different opinions. But a lot of the open borders, fanatics don't tolerate dissent. And I'm seeing a lot of mocking, ridiculing, nastiness, even abusive behavior, and at least 10 different people going on just today saying, Max, you get out of here. You want secure borders? Get out of here. Well, remember the Nolan chart. Top of the Nolan chart. Libertarians are not just the folks at the top. It's that whole triangle, that whole quadrant up there are libertarian. And what do political parties do? You bring in as many people as you can. And of course, people leave and people get replaced. But what you don't do, you don't build a political movement, you don't build a political party by going around looking for something where you disagree on an issue and tell people to get the hell out. Get the heck out of here. You're not a libertarian. You're not a libertarian. I don't want to see it. Go on, get out of here. That doesn't work. Freedom of association, yes, but freedom of association doesn't just mean people are free to leave. It means people are free to join. And if unfortunately, I'm pretty much 100% platform libertarian, but other people aren't reading the platform, or they're ignoring the wording, or they're ignoring the intent, and then ironically, it's people who, it sounds like, are agreeing with me 100% of the time, and they're still telling me to leave because they're not listening to my position, and simply because I say correctly, secure borders, because we have to vet people coming into the country, and they want to call that open borders. Well, they can call it whatever they want, but if you find that you agree with someone, but you just don't listen to people, and somebody else says, oh, this guy, oh, don't listen to him, get him out of here, get him out of the Libertarian Party. We need to purify. Well, you can purify, but I've got about 5,000 friends on my Facebook list. 5,000 Facebook friends. Most of those are former Libertarian Party members or lean libertarian in some way, shape, or form. I'd say about 80%, based on the conversations that I have. About 80% kind of lean libertarian. They would be in the libertarian quadrant somewhere. Might be a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, what have you. How many of those are current, active, dues-paying Libertarian Party members? Well, according to polling again, there are about 70 million people, 70 million Americans in that Libertarian quadrant, 70 million. And of those 70 million, how many are dues-paying members of the Libertarian Party? It's gone down to as little as, I've heard, 11 or 12,000. Somebody ventured a number as high as 40,000 at one point, and someone else, I don't remember the exact numbers, they said it's never been at 40,000. You have 511,000 registered libertarians in the 37 states where you're allowed to register as a libertarian voter. In a country with 330 million people, in one of the most libertarian countries on earth, maybe the most libertarian country on earth, more even than Hong Kong. Hong Kong is having their protest. They're protesting for freedom. They're in the streets waving the American flag. They're in the streets singing the Star-Spangled Banner, singing America's national anthem. Unbelievably. And we have people in the Libertarian Party who not only don't exhibit 1 ounce of patriotism, but a shoe patriotism. Well, why are you in the Libertarian? Why are you in politics at all if you're not there for the good of the country? You're not going to get any money. You're not going to get any money in a virtually tax-free society. You're not going to get any money out of politics. That's the whole point. It's to clean up the corruption so that there's no, power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. In a Republican form of government, small r, a principled form of government, as the Founding Fathers intended, small, it's frugal, it's limited in its size and scope. We believe in limited government. Government should be as small, as frugal, and as decentralized as possible. And we believe that you have the right to live your life as you see fit, as long as you're not harming anyone else. So if you're one of these purists who only stick around to go through the party and just kick people out everywhere you can, you're not helping, and all you're doing is fanning the flames for people getting out. And as vast majority of my friends who are former libertarians say, get out of there, you're not doing any good, go join the Republican Party, because the only way pro-liberty people can get elected, they keep saying, is to run as Republicans. And unfortunately, I have to admit that, yeah, that's the only way I see libertarians getting elected, because as soon as you get involved in the Libertarian Party, the purists come in and they just attack you like a foreign invader, and it's Those people are totalitarian. They're controlling. They're control freaks. They're not going to listen to this video, not to the end. Probably not going to, even click on it, let alone see the first 5 minutes of it. Estimate: how many Americans would be killed if Congress actually enacted complete open borders policy? Well, roughly, based on the figures that I showed you, if worst case scenario, if all those people, 750 million people came in, between 100 and 150,000 people would be killed in America every year, just murders. Never mind millions of kidnapping, rape, sexual assault, human trafficking, robberies, burglaries, felony assault. Certainly millions of violent crimes committed against Americans every year. When you've got countries out there with 10 to 15 times higher homicide rates, so many countries with 5 to 10 times higher homicide rape rates and aggravated rape rates. So of those, in worst case scenarios, you get 2 billion, mostly from the high crime countries moving in. Of course, that seems improbable, but that's happened in the past. It's happened in the continent of Asia, back in the day when there was absolutely no immigration enforcement at all. And you've got parts of Asia, Southeast Asia, China, India, Southeast Asia that are just absolutely packed to the gills. But if you have no immigration enforcement at all, and you don't vet people, and you don't put any limits, that's the second issue. If you don't put any limits, if we had 2 billion people move in from the highest crime countries in the world, of those 437,000 homicides, naively or simply, you'd be looking at potentially over 300,000 of those homicides each year moving into America, and millions of kidnapping, rape, people being burned to death, Christians put in steel cages and burned to death, Arab girls as young as 8 or 9 years old refusing to be raped by ISIS fighters are put into cages, metal cages, and they're burned to death. People beheaded, tortured to death all over the world. I've been to 50 or 60 other countries around the world, and there are some countries out there, and there are some cities that are so dangerous I wouldn't even want to send my friends or family members there, and I wouldn't go back at all. I wouldn't even take the chance, no matter how nice the weather is. But if you brought the bulk of that population in, and they brought all their friends and family members, and you know how people network, once you see half your village or half your city is moved to America, guess what? The whole city, the whole village, they would empty out and move to America. So potentially more than 2 billion, but anywhere from, depending on how many move in, an additional 100,000 to 300,000 homicides happening in America every year, with complete open borders, no restraints on migration, no background checks, no vetting whatsoever, plus millions and millions of violent crimes, plus millions of additional property crimes, and population density that we couldn't even imagine. So I support secure borders, and if you think that that's wrong, just go on to some of the libertarian discussion pages. Let's open up the immigration debate and talk about whether or not we should limit the total number of people coming into the country every year. Be sure to click like and subscribe, leave your comments, and I'll put some links down there in the description. But most importantly, go to some of the libertarian pages and discuss. Should there be limits on immigration? Should we have quality over quantity? Should we have background checks? Should we have a vetting process? Or just say, screw it, have absolutely no immigration enforcement, and just tell people from corrupt socialist third world, crime-ridden hellholes to just go ahead and move right in, bring your whole family, and then let all these multinational corporations just fly people in, running the planes, trains, and ships in and day out, and day in and day out, flooding the country from with people from some of the most dangerous parts of the world. So I say limit immigration. I'm for secure borders, and I'm not going to change my position as some people demand, because I think for myself, and that's what libertarianism is all about. So that's Max Abramson, libertarian candidate for president. Let me know what you think.